Alrighty, so hopefully we have better luck with the screens today. So at the end of class, you don't need to put the code in or anything. At the very end of class on Friday, we finished up by practicing some of our terms with a mentee. So we had to put a bunch of, I don't want to use black, it'll look like all the rest of the ink. There we go. Put a bunch of the terms that we had learned all together to try to figure out, well, what are some of the best choices for animals out of the list. And in this case, you only got pictures. So we had to kind of identify, well, what are the animals we're being given, and which one or ones are best associated with the terms here. So let's start by looking at the terms that we have and figuring out, well, what do they mean? Okay, so what does it mean to be endothermic? Good, so I'm going to make my own heat. Oh, that's terrible. We get the idea. Making that worse the more I correct that somehow. All right, good. So I make my own heat. Hey, what about homeothermic? What does this mean? Good, I have a stable body temperature. Okay, good. And I am fusiform. What does it mean to be fusiform? I'm teardropped or streamlined. Good. Okay, rude. So I, as an organism, need to be all three of these things in order to be the organism of choice. Okay, so let's just take them one by one, and let's do some process of elimination. So let's start with endothermic. Okay, so let's look at our organisms down here. Okay, which of these organisms are not endothermic? One. All right, what is one? So some kind of reptile, a lizardy friend. So those guys are ectothermic, right? Okay. So whatever else they may be, okay, they're not going to qualify for this first thing. And this little guy probably does not necessarily fit all of these other bullets either, but they're not going to fit this first one. Okay. Who else might not be endothermic? Number 5. Good. What is number 5? Some kind of fish, right? And fish is also ectothermic. Okay, anybody else here don't belong? Okay, what is this guy? We're talking about number 3, right? All right, so we've identified that as 2 different things, and that's going to matter here. So I heard dolphin and shark. Our projector kind of stinks. Yeah, the projector could be better in here. So in this case, it's going to matter. So how you've identified that is actually going to affect your result here, right? Which is why I don't use pictures on tests. All right, so if you identified it as a dolphin, would we cross it off here? No, right? What is a dolphin? Is it a reptile, a bird, a mammal, a fish? It's a mammal, right? Weird to kind of think about, but it's a water mammal, okay? So as a mammal, we would want to keep that because mammals should be endothermic. If it's a shark, if you identify this as a shark, would we cut this or keep this? You would cut this, right? Right. Because a shark is what kind of animal? Some kind of fish. Good, right? And most fishes are ectothermic. Good. Okay, so depending on how you interpreted that photograph, okay, you may have slightly different answers. But if you saw it as a dolphin, we better have kept that bad boy. Okay, so given what we have left, okay, does the answer of homeothermy cut any more individuals? No, right? So remember, homeothermy means we have a stable body temp. Okay, do birds have stable body temperatures? Yes, ma'am. Right? Our dolphins, right, as mammals, these guys have stable body temperatures. Right? And then our little, sweet little kangaroo rat. Okay, now, if we had not crossed off friendly lizard or red-faced fish, okay, this would be another way we could go back and look at them. Okay? Particularly as fishes. Right, this is one of our prime examples as common poikilotherms. So this would be a way that we could reinforce and say, okay, I know for sure fish is not a good choice. Okay, so let's go ahead and move forward to fusiform. Right, this is having that sort of teardrop or bullet kind of shape. So if I look at that, then, is there anyone else I should be cutting off my list? Our poor mouse, right? Is our mouse very fusiform? No, she's kind of a pudger. Okay, but that makes sense, right? What is the point of being fusiform? Being aerodynamic or hydrodynamic. Where does our mouse friend live? On land, right? Commonly like running around under vegetation or something. So is being fusiform really going to help him or her? Not significantly. Okay, so she can go ahead and live her best chubby life. Okay, so are we going to cut either of these two? No, right? Our falcon friend here, okay, we can even see from this photo, is quite, am I drawing? Okay, I'm drawing. Teardrop shaped. I exaggerated that incidentally. I'm quite bad at this. Okay, and our dolphin is also quite teardrop shaped. Okay, so assuming you identified option 3 as a dolphin, okay, you should have 2 good choices here. Okay, if you identified option 3 as a shark, you would only have 1. Okay, great job. Everybody see how we worked through this? Okay, and how these terms are useful and how they're applied for all of our different organisms, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, was this helpful? All right. See if I can get back out of here. Maybe I'll think about it. All right. I'm still on your updates. Okay, so at the very end here then, we have a handful of terms left that we need to finish up our vocabulary, some of which that will feel a little bit familiar. And these are terms we're going to be using a lot here, particularly in lab, as we start exploring our new organisms. And then we'll use them a lot in classes too, particularly in our subclasses, our subgroupings, or our orders, right? These are terms we're just starting to get familiar with, to help us differentiate, again, how are these categories fitting together. Okay, so we've already talked a little bit about some reproductive terms. We talked about things like oviparity and viviparity, right? So that's all about how are organisms born, right? And how are they getting nutrition before and after birth? So for this part, we're really talking about, right, how are organisms conceived, right? How are they fertilized in the first place? And this is another way we can think about grouping organisms together, okay? So for the most part, right, most commonly we're going to focus on our first two terms here, okay? And then at the very bit here, very rarely we see a little bit of this third term. Okay, so let's look at these. Okay, so I want to compare these first two terms first. So we're going to just focus on these first two bullet points. Okay, external versus internal fertilization. Okay, so external fertilization. And so when we're talking about these, we're thinking about where does the actual event of fertilization happen. So in this case, we really want to focus on fertilization. Literally, okay, where does the egg and sperm meet? Okay, so in some cases, we really want to focus on that because we have some unusual techniques that are going to make us set aside some of our biases to understand what's happening. Okay, so for external fertilization, okay, the meeting of the sperm and the egg is outside both of the male and female bodies. Okay, so you'll see me refer to this as lay and spray. Okay, the female lays the egg somewhere, okay, and the male sprays his sperms or spermatophores into that same space, and then it's in that space that the eggs become fertilized. Okay, so this first image shows us a really good example of this. Okay, so pretty much this exclusively is going to have to occur in some kind of aquatic medium, right? Some sort of space that's going to allow those two to come together. Right, so this is a spawning shoal. So we see here that the female eggs are going to come out, or the female eggs, also true. The female fishes will come out in a large group, release their eggs, and the males will follow them and release what's called the milk, or basically a lot of sperm, into that same space, which is this white cloud that you see here. Who's helping? Can't draw on the screen. Okay, this is what you see here. Okay, and in that mixed cloud is where fertilization is taking place, right? Okay, so this is not inside anybody's body, okay? And so this is what we're talking about when we say external fertilization. Okay, so let's compare that then. For internal fertilization, again, remember we want to focus on the fertilization moment. In this case, fertilization is happening inside the body, okay, usually inside the female body. Okay, so in this case, most of the time, okay, the female is keeping the eggs inside her body and is accepting some form of the male sperm or spermatophore. Now, most of the time, right, our mammal bias is going to assume with internal fertilization that there's direct deposit. Okay, so we might think of the mammal version of this where we're using some kind of intermittent organ. Okay, we might think about like a shark version of this, which we'll get to see, where you can like clasp on and line up cloacas and make this happen. But it's not always necessarily like that. So the example I have here, to give us a unique example, is my middle box, which is something that like salamanders do. So in this case, what we see here is a spermatophore. That's this white package we see on the center here. So in this case, the males are actually going to lay their sperm in the form of the spermatophore on the ground. It's like a present. gift that they're providing to their females. Okay, so the sperm is outside both bodies here. Okay, but the females, right, so this is the male that's laid it. The female will approach it, okay, and then sit on it, more or less, right? So accept said present. Right, but here's the key, and this is still internal fertilization, right? Because when that sperm and those eggs meet, it is inside the female's body. Okay, now we have to twist our mammal brains, right? Because this is not how we kind of picture internal fertilization occurring, but it still fits all of the requirements. Because the only thing we really care about is when does fertilization happen, right? When do the egg and the sperm meet? All of the other stuff, right, is just fancy show. Okay, how do we get to that point? Okay, so salamanders and sharks and mammals, right, everybody's just got a fancy dance, right, to get to the end result. Okay, some dances are just fancier or have more steps than others. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so we want to make sure we stay very focused, and no matter what we're talking about, we want to think, okay, very interesting. When does the egg and the sperm meet? Okay, and where is that taking place? And that's how we can ask our question, is this internal or external? Okay, any questions about those two before we add our third bullet? Okay, so our very last term then is this delayed fertilization. Okay, so delayed fertilization belongs as sort of a subtype of internal fertilization. Right, so only internal fertilizers, feels weird when you refer to them that way though. So only individuals or organisms that do internal fertilization can do delayed fertilization. Okay. And the reason for this is because the big key here is individuals that do delayed fertilization are females that can take the sperm or spermatozoa or whatever form of stuff that they're getting from the male, and they can hang on to it. They're going to store it instead of using it right away to fertilize those eggs. So I've got one example up here, bats. Okay, but there are several species that do this. Some desert lizards and desert mice, for example, do it. So the key behind this, and some rabbits as well, now that I'm thinking about it, is the reasons that you might not, for example, want or need to use the sperm or spermatozoa right away. So if we think, for example, about our desert creatures, okay, if I'm a lonely little mouse roving the desert, okay, I have several issues that I might run into. One, I may not encounter another mouse, let alone a mouse of the opposite sex, terribly frequently. So it may behoove me, okay, to hang on to as much stuff as possible on the off chance that it's months or perhaps years before I see another living male. Okay. Two, if I happen to encounter a male mouse, assuming I am said female mouse, and it is not a good time, right? So perhaps it is dead in the middle of the driest of dry seasons. Okay, but I do meet a good mate. Okay, passing up this opportunity to actually mate would be a bad choice, right? Because it may be 6 months, 8 months, a very long time before I see another male. But having offspring like right now would also be a bad idea, because the likelihood of them getting water or food not great. So they might die, I might die, right, from providing nutrients to them, from having them crying in my burrow, from just giving birth and resources being low. Okay, so delayed fertilization allows me to hang on, right? I just store it, right, as a little plug until it's ready to be used, right? Until conditions improve to a space, to the right time of year, the rains come, whatever it is, okay, right? My population triggers me to use it. And now not everybody does this, right? The deer in the forest do not store sperm, right? Humans, right? We ain't hanging on to that till a later time. So this is not an everybody kind of thing, but a handful of organisms, okay, that have very particular living habitats allow them to do this.
So was it the females that are like storing it, maybe like with their eggs? Okay.
Correct. Yeah. So the females are the ones storing it. And they're not storing it up with the eggs, right? They're storing it much lower in their vaginal canal, kind of as a nasty little plug.
So that is like humans can store it up to 3 days because that's
correct, right? So Maria's question is, humans do kind of store, and most organisms do. So sperm does live. So this is a separate issue, right? Sperm of most organisms, particularly mammals, can live outside of the males for several days sometimes if it's a good environment. This situation is different. So that's just fluid and sperm hanging out in a reasonably non-hostile environment for up to 72 hours, and that is true. Delayed fertilization is the active physiological process of taking sperm and protecting it in a mucus plug for up to, in some cases, like 9 months or a year. Great questions. Great icebreaker at a party. I didn't say I wouldn't teach you weird stuff. All right, any questions about any of the things that we've talked about in our vocabulary? Because I believe, and we already did our Menti, that is it. Okay. Don't be rude. I'm going to come in here.